this show, it's the Bible Journey. We are back on air to continue with our Bible analysis program, and we are glad that you have joined us this day for the study of the book of Exodus, and the chapter is 18. I hope you've studied it beforehand so that when we study, we are together and you understand what our pastors bring on board here. Now, with me is, first of all, Pastor Peter Nyaga. Pastor, how are you?
I'm good.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
And Pastor Dana Buya, are you okay?
I'm good.
Welcome to the discussion.
Grateful.
Right-hand side, we have Pastor Kabira Wakabira. Pastor, how are you?
Well, thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Now, we'll, of course, start with the word of prayer as we get to our study today. Pastor Kabira.
Dear Lord, this lesson is more about leadership and how you've called us and everyone by extension in the church to be inclusive in your work. May you be with us and bless us, and may our viewers and those who listen to these words, by the time they rest, they will be able to say, we've heard the Lord speak, for we pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. If you have a question or an input in the show, please remember to leave us your comment in the social media pages indicated at the bottom of your screen. If you want to watch later, follow our YouTube channels, and we'll be glad to learn together with you. Now, pastors, of course, Pastor has already alluded to the fact that this is also about leadership, and actually it comes out very strongly, the issues of delegation and such other like stuff. And now chapter 18, let me begin, of course, as usual, by reading verse 1 and 2 and 3. It says, "And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back with her 2 sons, of whom the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh." Now, we have an instance, it appears like Moses had sent Zipporah back home to her father, maybe because of the situation. You remember how dire the situation was, and obviously, we know even in this world, when somebody is in politics, the family also becomes a target sometimes for blackmail purposes. So, I don't know. Maybe for any of the other reasons, he sent them back. But now, after the Lord had done all this stuff for Israel, Jethro, the father-in-law, takes Zipporah together with the 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer, and comes with them to Moses. Now, just for our introductions, what do you have to say about that, Pastor?
It's not clear from the scriptures at what time exactly did Moses return or send back his wife and the 2 children. But what the Bible indicates that they were born in Egypt. Then he took them to the Midian, a time that is not very clear. But historians argue when the plague started intensifying in Egypt, that's when Moses feared for his family and returned them back to his in-laws. However, that's from history.
On that same point, unless the pastors want to disagree on the same, but I would want to ask, Moses fears for his family. What about the Israelites he's leading? He's saving his own.
I'm saying it's from historians, but the Bible does not tell us why and when exactly.
Maybe we'll just say, it's not, let's be clear, it's not clear why.
Why and when.
But because of the context, we could say because of leadership. That's why it's introduced. That's why Moses writes it in Exodus 18. For purposes that direct Moses to think he will be an effective leader for one reason or the other. But as to the reasons as why, we cannot speculate. And maybe because this program is not about speculating, I will refrain from using he left. Let me just say, for purposes of leadership, that is in chapter 18, that's why we see Zipporah being introduced. And being
I'll be coming back to you on the importance or the meaning of the names Gershom and why they are so important that he should have called them so. But first of all, let me get Pastor Dan's comments.
Yeah, I think what you shared is accurate, definitely. I know we do have some, you know, skepticals and other Bible scholars who use uncouth methods of Bible interpretation, who use, you know, the command of Moses. You know, Christ talks about divorce and says that, you know, Moses just told you that all you need is to write a bill of divorce.
And so he divorced with his wife.
Yeah, so there are people actually who argue that Moses actually divorced Zipporah, but that is not the case. Rather, what you've shared is much more accurate, that at some point, because of the perhaps practicality of leadership, the intensity was so much involved, that as they set off to go to Egypt from Midian, then they went back. Maybe as Moses realized, it dawned on him what really he was going to be dealing with, that it wasn't easy, it was going to be too involving. Such that by the time they're meeting with Aaron, perhaps they had gone back at that point. We are not sure if they even ever got to Egypt. We know they set off, you know, because I think if that is it Exodus chapter 4? Yeah, chapter 4, you know, verse 18. We know that Moses set off with his family, even with the kids. You know, remember when he had to circumcise, you know, the son and all that. Yeah, we just don't know at what point they went back here. Okay. But all that said and done, the most important thing is that now that they are out of imminent danger, then now the father hears and brings them also. It's a good family reunion. Wow,
wow, wow. Now he says in verse 3 that he called him Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. Then in verse 4, the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh.
We've been going through the book of Genesis and Exodus, and every name has had a meaning.
Meaning, yeah.
Vis-a-vis,
and there is an experience pushing them to...
You name a child with a future plan, as more like some prophecy, or also through the experience you've gone, because you don't want to forget the milestone. Just
Except
like the names of places we just did, the names of people. So maybe it will be a good lesson to many of us here, young parents. What was the reason behind calling your child that name? Many of us look for the most fanciest name, you know, you don't even know, and then by the time you go realize the name really means something so weird. Well, you know, in the end, even a child is an... But
let me ask you, Pastor, on a light note, what inspired you to call your boy and girl?
My children are called Aleph and Alpha. Because for me, I really wanted them to appreciate that they're the best thing. For Aleph is the first letter of Hebrew. My one child is Old Testament, the other one is New Testament. That's what all of them are biblical. Anyway, so similarly, Moses also does the same thing. He wants to be able to look at these children and remind himself and his family and remind the children that they are part of his experience with God. And that's why he names Gershom. Gershom literally means you are a stranger there. And that's why he explains, for he said, I've been a stranger in a foreign land. Then he gets a second born and names him Eliezer. Eliezer is a very good name that means my God is help, because
El and Ezer.
Yes, El is God, and Ezer is here about help. So the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. You know, they are just like, you remember the last time, Israelites will pass and they will say, let us put here, the Lord is a banner. The Lord is my banner. You know, it reminds you physically. When you look at your children, what do you see? Do you see God helping you? Do you see a miracle in it? Do you see God being with you? Or you just basically see them as fruits of my womb, something like that. So I will imagine even Moses, as a leader, he's teaching us about even the small things. He may be a leader, he may have been in favor with God, but even the children, he not want to name them. Remember, he was a prince. He will have named them names that will make them comfortable to go back. You know, he will call them some nice name, Bin Pharaoh, you know, so that when now it's time to go back, basically they have the best of both worlds. But he gave them Hebrew names, number one, and Hebrew names that have meaning in relation to the Exodus. so that he will always be able to remember. I think.
Wow, and I think it's a good advice to the viewer.
To you also.
And to me also, that we give our children names that have good meanings and, you know, that show us the experience and how God has really helped us in this world. Now, in verse 5 and 6, and 6 and 7, now he had said to Moses, no, let me from 5. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. Now he had said to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. The act of Moses, you know, he's a leader among us, all these people. They esteem him so high. But still, he recognizes that this is my father-in-law, and I really have to obey him. He bends and even kisses him. You know, a nice reception, Pastor Nyaga. What do you say about that?
It's family relationships. It's very, very important in the Christian life. God establishes himself and actually he introduces himself within a family context. The plan of redemption is based on a family context. God created a family. So we cannot run away from talking about family. And I think that's why this to me is very, very important. That Moses, the mighty man of God, had a family. And I'm appreciating that Jethro, you know, his father-in-law, he is also proud of Moses, because he comes and says, I, your father-in-law. If Moses was a rude guy, was a bad guy, he wouldn't want to.
He wouldn't even
associate himself. The fact that he comes, that's an excitement. He says, I, your father-in-law. He speaks a lot. And then in verse number 7, when we see how Moses reciprocates back, the respect he gives him, bowing down and kissing him, it shows a family that was neat. And I think it's good for us to appreciate that once we get married, we get into that very important relationship. It's the snare of the evil one when we see, you know, wrangles in families. And especially among the in-laws, they can't face each other. Or even a son with his father-in-law, they can't sit and talk. But God wants us to have that relationship. To me, that is what I'm appreciating here. That despite the fact that Moses is a mighty man of God in leadership, he actually has a family that he values so much.
Yeah,
He has
you know,
and the act of obeisance, what he does to...
Exactly, it's a sign of respect. You know, you can be a president of the country, you can be a king, but your father is your father. You can be the most learned person, you can be an ordained pastor, but still the filial obligations that we have as children to parents, they remain, they stand. And actually the commandment, which, you know, two chapters from now we are going there, one says that, you know, you obey your parents in the Lord, and that is a commandment with a promise of the Lord. So this is very important, and this text actually, the entire pericope goes to verse 12, where he throws a bash. You know, that is how we'll call it. He throws a feast for the father-in-law who has come. It's a family reunion. He calls around the elders, the leaders. Here, my father-in-law has come here. So this is a very important aspect, and you know, Paul talks even about even as ministers, as a church, our obligations, especially to the people of your own household. They take precedence. We cannot be out here, even as pastors, and ministering to entire congregations, our audiences. We do have a first obligation, a first church. It must be our families. So this is very, very quite.
Can I note about the in-law part? This is the in-law. You know, it's the in-law naturally. Maybe where I come from, I don't know. We more on the side of the in-laws of the man rather than the in-laws of the lady. For Moses to do this much respect, you can imagine he really was positive about his family, considering where Zipporah was coming from. You remember Miriam detesting Zipporah. You know, his family. Maybe it could be even one of the reasons as to why Moses is shielding them. But according to Moses, his filial feelings, I mean, he knows this is my father-in-law. People may not like him, and for a good reason. Finally, look at what Jethro does. If he had not given that much respect, how do we know Moses would have gone? His leadership style would be. Maybe I will say it's because sometimes we feel like our in-laws pressed us too much, especially as men. So you only associate with them. I took their daughter, thank you very much. I think I'm now done. Once I finish paying where I come from, and Pastor Nyaga, we're supposed to do 48 goats. When I'm done with my 48 goats, I think, thanks a lot, I am done. But this is a guy who did not count it. So for me, I want to be able to appreciate, on just a random, on a social perspective, how Moses is relating with his own father-in-law, sorry, rather than even his own father. He ends up giving him more advice. His own father. Maybe it will be a challenge to me and to the rest. Imagine if you will be able to get so much advice and so much respect to your father-in-law.
Yeah, and Pastor, again, in verse 8, the Moses witness, you know, I think there's an element of witnessing here, telling how God has been good to you. And of course, you see the effect in verse 9 and 10, and even 11, which is so significant there. The witnessing leads to Jethro, who was actually a priest, in saying that, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them.
Two things here. I'll start from verse number 7. Mention something very important. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. I wanted to talk about something about going into the tent. Amidst the busy and emotive situation of Moses' leadership, when his family appeared, he had time for the family. He stopped everything, and he went to the tent. Literally, this is going home with them and staying with them.
Close the office.
Close the office, right, and have time for the family. And I think, to me, this resonates so well, and as pastors and other leaders, it's always good to remember your family. Go home. Create time. Go home. Thank you. That's not the word.
After serving the Lord,
go home and have time with your family.
Yeah, you know, in saying on that, I was listening to President Trump in some interview and with the kids. They were saying that any time any of his family member calls, he takes the phone call, even if he's on phone with another president. And I was like, wow, okay, that is
good
powerful.
idea. Yes. Go home.
Though some would challenge that.
Well,
Yes, Pastor.
No, okay. Then the other point I wanted to, when you go down from verse 8, reading keenly, you see this man Jethro as a man who has been praying for Moses' ministry. Now, it's unfortunate that the Bible does not give us an incident when Moses returned or came with his family asking Jethro to stay with them. The way we see the meeting, we don't know what happened when they met. What was the dialogue then? But I am seeing, when I read from verse 8 or 7 down to verse 12, I see Jethro, who was left with a burden of praying for his son-in-law, both for his well-being and for his ministry. And now he has a reason to thank God, because verse number 12, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifice to offer to God. This is, he's praising God because of an answered prayer. To me, it's very beautiful. Wow. You know, we would expect your father or your mother to be praying for you, but not your father-in-law, your mother-in-law. But you know, when you have a father-in-law who prays for you,
then
yeah,
no
it makes you feel so good, you know. Of course, I have a father-in-law who calls early in the morning just to pray for you. Said, son, I'm praying for you.
Oh, great.
And I want to imagine this is what Moses is feeling. It feels so good when, you know, not your real father, but your father-in-law actually so much concerned on a daily basis is praying for you.
Yeah,
right. And this in spite of him being, you know, actually, this is not a believer in God. He's a priest of Midian. This one idolatrous people. And obviously, where Pastor Nyaga has brought us to, where Jethro, by the way, this is Reuel also. I know this may confuse our audience, because in chapter 2, he is introduced as Reuel. Yeah, he's the same person. So you see, because of the testimony of Moses, he ascribed all the glory to God. And so there is a conversion in verse 11. And after conversion is worship. Because now verse 12, it tells us when Jethro realizes that how mighty God is, he worshipped. That is all he had to do. Your father
But remember, it begins
How
by saying,
important is witnessing in verse 8, which leads
Yes.
to what we are saying in verse 11 and 12.
Because he had
before
done-
Pastor John, you come in.
I'm looking at the time, and I thought he should.
No, okay, sorry. I'll just be quick so that he says, he came, verse 1 begin, when Jethro, the priest of Midian, father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses. He had heard.
Yeah.
He had an idea, but it was different when somebody was speaking.
That's right.
That's the power of witnessing.
Yeah.
Your testimony, people know God does wonders. Everybody knows God does miracles.
We know.
Until you hear somebody saying how God has
He has
been
done
wonderful
to
to
me
me.
now.
That
Right.
makes you feel like I can identify with that. And I think that is what, and I want to thank God for Moses. He did not praise himself.
No.
He did
It was
not talk
about
about
God.
how, and look at it's who struck the rock, Moses. Who lifted up the Moses?
It was me.
But Jethro had, Jethro. If it was me, I'll be like,
man,
I'm the
yeah,
president.
those are the
You know what has been.
I led them through the Red Sea. Man.
I'll take him to the chamber. Like Ezekiel. You see
Yeah.
this thing, this rod
Wow.
is doing miracles. That is what
You want
ideally.
me to show you?
But look at what he says. It's
Right.
the Lord who's been done this. And finally he says, now, I like that verse, honestly. I
Right.
know that the Lord, not
Right.
Lord now.
The Lord.
Not the Lord.
Very
The one
specific.
you're talking about. It's not now is greater than all the gods.
That's right.
For in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. He acknowledges that some people will pretend they are better. He acknowledges that gods will be proud and above, but he was greater than all. That's why, as Pastor Dan is saying, he had to give an offering,
Yeah.
I think I am on the right place and the right time.
I don't know, I should study the history of this guy later. What happened? Did he continue being a priest of the Midian?
Unfortunately, it's not.
That's why I
You-
wanted
you
to
have
come
that?
in, just to give a glimpse
in
of.
a few seconds,
like,
maybe.
yeah. There's a strong argument that this man, Jethro, was a relative of Abraham.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard it.
When you go to Genesis chapter 25, verse 1 and 2, Abraham and another wife, the concubines, among the wives that he had, Keturah.
Keturah.
And Keturah bore children, And she bore, verse number 2 says, that's 25 verse 1 and 2, verse 2 says, she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So the Midian here brings out the reign of the Midian. Yeah. So he had connections with God, though in dimly. It was not very clear to him. But having come from the lineage of Abraham, and that's no wonder he's made a priest of whatever religion he was. He had that fear of God. So what he was waiting to see is, to know is this true God. And I think through Moses, who has done those great things. And Moses says, it's not me, it's God. No, he knows, no, this is God.
And I think this is the purpose why all Israelites were called to bring back the children of Abraham back to the fold, so that they may end up together as one family. And Moses has really done it well. We are taking a short break, our dear viewer, and we'll be back to continue this discussion. It is the book of Exodus chapter 18. Don't go away. Welcome back to this show. It's the Bible Journey. We are very glad that you are still tuned on to Hope Channel, and may God bless you for being with us, and I hope that you are learning much. Of course, we are still here with Pastor Peter Nyaga, Pastor Dan Abuya, and Pastor John Wakabira. Welcome. Now, in verse 13, now there is Jethro has settled. Now at least they have sacrificed and all the witnessing and everything. Now it's time for work. Of course, after you attend to your family, you have to go back to work again.
Right.
It's important. Now 13 says, and so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, what is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out, for this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. I don't know, should I stop there first, or I read to verse...
You can stop there.
Yeah, okay,
Stop there.
yeah. So now, Moses at work. At least now we know he used to sit down and judge the people and, you know, solve the issues that they had. And, you know, all that work he was doing. But he was all alone. You can imagine the stress. How many churches are you in charge of, Pastor Kabira?
7.
7. Approximate number?
Approximate number of people. I don't know. I maybe around 2,000.
2,000.
Yes.
But imagine this was a million.
This
plus.
was on a million. The whole idea is Moses believing he's doing the right thing.
Mm.
You know, that's a funny thing.
And maybe believing I'm the one who was called, so...
I don't know. You know, as I said, we were introduced to something.
Mm-hmm.
In chapter 17, if
Yeah.
I will go back, chapter 17, verse 13 said, so Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. But what was Moses doing? If Moses was up there, the Bible say, every time Moses would lift up the hand, they would win. So who defeated again? Moses is not getting this. He gets the concept, but he assumes that he's the only one. And he has a very valid reason, which is true. Let me say, the reasoning is true, the application is what is wrong. He says, and Moses said to his father-in-law, verse 15, chapter 18, verse 15, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have difficulty, they come to me to judge between one another and me, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws. He says, truly, which is true, that he is the one who speaks to God. But what he did not get was there were some things that it was not about inquiring about God. For example, judging between two people did not require God to tell him who was right and wrong. He knew who was right and wrong. So he was wearing himself with doing God's work plus more, which he ascribed to be God's work, which made him the sole giver of judgment. And that is where the problem was in. He was not able to differentiate from common knowledge, from experience, judgments based from experience, judgments based on practice, judgments based on laws and regulations that were there. He was not able to differentiate that and think somebody else can do that. So now he is doing it as if he's the only one who can do that, forgetting that God can also do the same.
He's just still learning.
Yes, he's on a learning curve. I cannot blame him. He's on a learning curve.
Just comment. Don't touch on 19. Yeah, just remain up there.
That's where I wanted to go.
No.
I don't
First
know where
remain
you
up
are
there.
limiting me. But anyway, maybe I wanted to share something different from what Pastor John.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
I'm still appreciating Jethro. Because to me, the focus here is more on Jethro than on Moses. Now, Jethro, in verse 17, 18, and of course 19, which you're telling me not to touch,
but you are touching. Okay.
He listens. You know, it comes from verse 7, where they get into a tent. So they have a dialogue. And they review, since the time Moses left and all that he has been doing, and he has been listening carefully. Not to challenge Moses, but to strengthen Moses,
And help
to
him.
improve his ministry, to improve his service. He is proud of his son. And after listening to all that Moses is saying, now he sees where he can come in and support him. It also shows me a man, a father, who is out to improve his son's life, his ministry. And when, in verse 19, now let me get there.
No, before you get there, let's hear Pastor out first.
Well,
You can imagine all the queue, morning to evening, people queuing, and
Right.
only one person attending. I usually don't like queues.
yeah, that is quite hectic, and of course, that is why the priest Jethro says that you are not only wearing yourself out,
Even the
but
people
also the
too.
people. They're all lined up coming to see you. Moses had a very unique position because when you read in Deuteronomy 33, it presents Moses as occupying all the three offices of judge, priest and king.
King.
And the term it uses is Jeshurun,
Prophet.
which is another nice term for Israel. That he judged, he was the king and he was the priest of Jeshurun, you know, throughout the wilderness, yeah. So it was not only judging, that's what I'm trying to drive at, I'm actually muddying the waters. That it was much more. Beyond the judicial duties, he also had the executive duties as a king, and he also had the religious duties, where he had to instruct, you know.
So after sitting down all day judging
Right.
the people, he's the one to still say, okay, now we need water, Moses. Then he goes and solves the problem.
This guy was
We
heading
need
all
to
the
move.
arms of
You-
government.
Yeah,
All the
but,
three arms
but,
of
but,
government.
but we appreciate in chapter 17, eh? Because we saw in chapter 17, God himself had witnessed that challenge, which Jethro is bringing out. So, from human perspective,
At least he had started.
and he told him, pick elders.
Right.
So God has started communicating to him. We also don't want to trash Moses because we see he and delegated to Joshua. But before we come to chapter 18. But I think the work was enormous. There was need for further delegation.
That's right, yeah.
And that is where
And
we
number
come
two,
to
also now, there's a difference between now and before.
Yeah, yeah.
Before Moses was alone. Now he has come, he's been rejoined with his family. He also needs time for his family from here, going on
That's right.
forward. So Jethro's advice, taking care of all these things.
That's right.
You were alone there. But no, you're not alone. You have your two sons, and your wife is here. And you have all this
And
congregation.
some daughters also.
And some daughters also. So you need to do things differently now.
Yeah. And let me now read verse from 19.
Just
then
before you
can-
read 19,
Okay.
I'm just trying to imagine Moses and God when they do a pact. You know, I want you to be my leader. Moses says, no. You tell somebody else. I want you to do this. No. You know, several times until God tells him, I will show you, I will lead you, I will give you somebody to speak, I will do all these things. Then why will God be quiet when it comes to, let me say quiet, no, not really quiet, because he
In
uses
quotes, in
Jethro
brackets.
in the end. Why does God want Moses to learn through this? You know, the others, all he needed to do was, it's time to go. Moses wasn't doing that. The cloud begin moving and people will go. There is no water. God will do. Why in this particular lesson of leadership does God want Moses to interact with his fellow human beings and learn? That is where I am more stuck in. I hope the pastors will help me. But I was trying to imagine, sometimes it's not everything that comes through divine intervention.
Yeah.
We have to get that. It's
God
not.
allows
There
some
is
other means,
there is some more teachable moments that come from that is around you. Not necessarily. It's not that it's not God guiding, but it will make more sense if you learned it from somebody else, from someone else. God will use.
Yeah.
It's not all the time that you'll. Lord, should I get married to this one or not? And then some young people pretend and say, I will sleep, and then I'll ask God to tell me between A and B who to choose and what.
In a dream.
There will need to be more. It's not. I'm not saying it's not divine intervention. It is, but it has a people relationship. Another person will teach you better when you have got more relay. Otherwise, it will almost. If God, I was imagining if God had said do this and that, then it will be a law that is not changeable.
Now, verse 19. Now, listen now to my advice. I'll give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God, and you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every greater matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they shall themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people will also go to their place in peace.
Read 24.
24, okay. So Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said.
Thank you. Now let me come in.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what I
You are
wanted.
really waiting for that.
Yes. I love Moses. When they come to this point, I love Moses. We have seen, right from when they started murmuring, Moses was not at any time listening to the murmurings of Israel and succumbing to their pressure. He was always very conscious with God, what God wanted. But we see him here when his father-in-law comes. And as you read verse number 19, it says, listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel and God will be with you. Moses is able to differentiate what appears to be advice from very genuine people, which actually is not.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And what is a godly counsel? So he listens to his father-in-law. He's a mighty leader with all the multitude, but I am excited of him because he has a teachable spirit.
And ready to take advice.
He is a mighty leader, but with a teachable spirit.
Right.
To me, that is very, very, very important. And you see verse number 24, as I was saying to read, it says, and Moses hidden the voice.
Yeah.
So and I think as leaders, at times you can be lost. You know, with like I'm in a church that has many members, okay? And you know, you can easily as a pastor be lost, blinded by where you see yourself, find yourself, and you think you're here, you know everything. That's why not Pastor Dan is in this congregation, is Pastor Nyaga, because Pastor Nyaga has ability and knowledge to manage these people. And you lock yourself from, you know, that aspect of being also a student and listening to godly counsels. So to me, this is very, very important.
Wow.
It doesn't matter the level you are in. You could be a local church pastor, you could be in the conference or the union, the division, wherever you, even the general conference. You should have a spirit that you can be instructed.
You should listen.
You should listen.
Somebody may
Humility.
be low
The
there,
humility.
but
And
we
no,
might
no
have-
wonder he's called a man with a lot of meekness.
Yeah, the most humble man.
Most
And
humble man.
you know, just to add this, our doctrine of the church, we draw a lot from this, even how we do the church leadership, denomination, election process. These words in verse 21, you read them, and you can't help but wonder whether Paul just picked them when he gives
Yes.
the qualities of a good leader. You know, maybe in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Pastor, if you can read that to me. I want us just to compare and see. So what I'm drawing at is this. This wasn't just Jethro, the father-in-law.
Yeah.
God, and Pastor Kabira brought out this very powerfully, God uses agencies, different agencies, to do his bidding. And in this case, he's using Jethro to bring out a very important aspect
And
for his church.
And I would really agree with you because of verse, especially verse 23, the way
Right.
Jethro speaks here,
Exactly.
it's as if he had a conversation with God.
And God,
so God commands
exactly,
you.
yeah. So in other words, he's saying that, you know, this is subject to God's
Yes, that's
Final approval.
that's what I wanted to say.
right.
He gives advice, but what you're saying is, but he tells Moses, if God approves of this,
Exactly.
you know, it's. I'm not
Exactly.
telling you now you can follow it.
Right, yeah.
That is verse 21. I think you read
23 now,
23
yeah.
yes.
If you do
if
this
you do
thing,
this thing, yes. And God so commands you. You know,
Right.
I'm giving you advice. I think it has worked best for me. But if God sees it's the best, you know, he's not giving it as a rule. You've
Yeah.
taken the advice,
Right.
but because you talk to God anyway, see if it fits with what God says.
The Lord.
And if it's okay, then go ahead.
Right.
So anyway,
Wow.
yes.
It's a powerful
Yes.
thing you have actually highlighted. Because again, talk about now our situation as pastors
Right,
and
right.
congregations, and we have elders who always come and advise us.
Right.
So elders can give you advice, but which actually, when you look at it, is not godly. So that aspect of Jethro, telling him, but my word is not final.
That's
Consult
right.
with God.
That's right.
He respects the office
Exactly.
of Moses.
Exactly. Yeah.
He doesn't assume that office. Okay, he is advising him, but he knows there's an office this man is in that I can't get in, and he's the only one who is able to consult with God.
That's right.
And so I think even our elders need to respect the pastor's office. You advise pastors, but also respect that office, so that you let them go and consult with God. Not instruct them and force them.
What if you think he's not taking heed to your advice, and maybe to you it doesn't
things.
appear?
You live in with God.
Yeah, the pastor. The
You live
pastor
with- you live in
doesn't
with-
seem
you-
to be.
Well, you are the elder thinking.
Yeah, I'm the
that
elder.
the
I
pastor is
think
not
that
thinking.
you are
But where
not
do you think
really-
so? Where do you think so?
Well, you
So,
know.
so should I still obey that office of the pastor?
Now, Nick, listen. Now, listen. to
Yeah, I'm
this, huh?
speaking this because
Yes.
I know it's a mindset out there.
now listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, okay, now let me listen.
Now listen.
Yes.
When we get to Leviticus, you may be very afraid even to ask that question. I think we are living at very slippery times, when perhaps because of the postmodern mindset, the membership, there is a blurring of lines between what is sacred and common. In fact, in Leviticus, you'll be surprised over and over again. At the threat of death, the people are told, you keep off. The sanctuary belongs to the Levite. Yeah.
Levites,
And I know sometimes this it may look like a feeling of entitlement, but no, God is very clear. This office, this is the boundary. So it's not to you to think that the pastor
You
is
are
not
not.
listening. Yeah, yeah. So you really need to go there. It's almost like you're treading on holy ground, because it's God's place, and He has put this person over there. I think this is something that
So
we
the
need to
much
add.
the much I can do is be like Jethro and say, okay, I think, but you look at it and consult with God.
But I think
It's
Jethro
advisory.
provided.
Just
Jethro
advisory,
provided an answer. Look at, and verse 22 says, and let them judge the people at all times. It's fine as an elder. Then it will be that every great matter shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. You know, there is the division of the things you can do
That's
and
right,
things you
yeah.
can do.
Sure, right, yeah.
If you may think I have not done my ordination right of elders,
Right.
but there is nothing you can still do about it. Let me give us an example where pastors can do an ordination, elders can do child dedication. If you think I didn't do it right or didn't do it right, the best you can do is tell me what you did is not right, but it will still be under my office to still to be able to correct
right,
a thing.
yeah.
Jethro is giving some very good advice.
So if you refuse, and you, of course, according to you, it's supposed to be the way you did
It's
it.
not about
It's
supposed.
not upon me to.
You
don't
cannot
come-
do
you don't
the
come
same.
knock my
You
office.
cannot.
Let me say it this way, Ratan. Let me say it this way. Just
Finally, as we conclude.
using
Right.
Jethro's words, if you do this thing, that's verse 23, if you do this thing and God so commands you, no, that phrase, and God so commands you, it means the advice that Jethro is giving has two sides, or possibilities. Either it is not godly, or
Then-
it is godly.
Yeah, sure.
So if it is godly, then it means it has approval of God. Go ahead and do it. If it is not godly, it has no approval of God. If you go ahead and do it, still God will bring consequences. So there is a line I can't pass as Jethro.
That's right.
There's a boundary. I have advised you. Now, whatever happens in this enclosed circle is between you
And
and God.
Don't blame me.
Yes. So what is happening in our churches is elders, some church leaders who feel this boundary, this line which is drawn here, they can,
Yeah,
They can
we can
get in,
also.
yeah.
yes,
And
and,
you
and,
can-
and they come and sort the maize here in this circle. But Jethro says, no, it is not now my duty
Right.
to sort out the maize here. Is you and God. That circle is you and God.
Wow,
That's
thank
right.
you. Thank you. Now let's summarize in terms of now the lessons and of course what Moses does from 25. Yeah?
Yeah.
He does what he is told because it seems good to him, and I think he has consulted with God. It is right. Then he selects these people and they judge the people. Then after that, his father-in-law departs.
That's
Yes.
right, yes. So 25 says, and Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads. Really, this is the same language. I know I had sent Pastor Kabira to read for us there. But
Yes.
it is what, and I don't want us to read because of time, but,
Okay.
but we can check there, you know, the qualities of a
Timothy
church
3,
leader
1 to
and all
3.
that, yeah. It's very clear. And also Acts 6, remember how they choose, you know,
The deacons.
fill with the first deacons, yeah. The point I want to give here is this, the power of leveraging. Leveraging is being able to use the strengths of others. And that is powerfully rests on the church doctrine. That is how the body of Christ operates. We leverage on each
Different
other.
parts, functions.
Right, yeah. So that we leverage on people, your talents, which I don't have. We leverage on money, which we don't have. That's why businessmen are really good in leveraging money. They go for loans. You may have your 2 million, But a loan to you may be a liability, but to a businessman, that's a big asset. Yeah. We leverage on technology, especially on our time. It's very important. Our churches, we need to learn to leverage on technology. Don't shy away and say that, oh, these are no. Leverage on the knowledge,
And strategic management.
Strategy, all these things,
most of the time,
and time, of course, which is the element here that Jethro is telling Moses, you need to leverage on your time. You cannot use your time alone. You are one. If you have 1,000 elders, that is 1,000 hours.
Yes.
Right here.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Pastor?
Well, I would say is, as Moses was able to choose men, there are those who can be over 1,000 men. There are those who can be over 50. There are those who can be over 10. It was not random. It was not get yourselves into 10 and what. He chose people, and I will imagine, according to their abilities.
That's right.
But he also knew that you may have an ability, but the best you can be is over 10. Nyumba kumi, maybe begin from there. Then there are those who can be over 1,000, those who can be, including himself also. He recognizes that, but then there'll be things that I will also need. But what I want us to appreciate is he will ask God, not he will decide.
That's right.
It will get to a point where there are things he will ask of God. And that's the most important part for me. That we may have knowledge of 1,000, over 10, over 50 and all that, but it will get to a point where as a leader, I may not even have the answer. I will need to ask God of the same to approve of it or not.
I have
In 30 seconds.
I have a package of seminars I do on Jethro's mode of leadership. And I can tell you, if it's implemented in the churches, we'll have very dynamic and effective churches.
Amen.
You know, if you have a church...
And how can we get that package?
No, we just for training. I have it. I do that. But the point is, when you have elders in church, are they in charge of anything? We have deacons. Example, in Nairobi Central Church, where I have 83 elders, we need then each of these elders to be in charge of specific members in church and have specific deacons under him, so that he runs like a church. He monitors things. So when they come up here to the pastors, they are able to report the things that are happening. Imagine a church of 7,000 members on Nairobi Central Church. How do I know those members? How do I minister to them?
Right.
Then you have elders who are there for announcements and those other things. But if we look at the Jethro's mode of leadership, you are in charge of particular given specific number of individuals that you monitor on a weekly basis. We give you 200 members. Report on these members, monitor them, pray with them. We have deacons under you, visit with them. So that every single elder has a specific responsibility with his specific members, and he knows the specific needs, and then he can come and report.
Wow. Well, I think
like
for
a
me...
module you want another show for.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think maybe, but we need to get those. I think if the viewer needs that, they can
They can always
to
call
us,
for
then we
us.
can send them the PDF
Yeah.
copies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, for me, one thing that really catches my attention is the involvement of, you know, Moses agreeing to the plan of Jethro, to the strategic leadership style of Jethro, who is, again, tracing back from Genesis chapter 25, is also a child of Abraham. And it seems to me like God is still has not left out the other children of Abraham.
He's with them.
They are still here. And, you know, he wants to draw them closer to the kingdom.
But also remind our viewers as we close,
Yes.
not forget the last verse in this chapter, verse 27. It's
They
very,
should
very
not
important.
forget it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Actually, it's
I've
very,
reminded them.
Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own land.
Father-in-laws have to go.
They should go home.
They should not camp in our homes, you know. But on a light note, even when you come to advise somebody, you okay, advise him and you go.
Yeah,
right.
sure.
Give him space. That's the
right.
point here. Give him space.
Thank you very much, pastors, and may God bless you for all that. And our dear viewer, thank you very much. I know that you've really benefited from this. It's ended on a high note. Thank you very much, father-in-laws. Listen to that. And all the viewers, remember the last verse of that chapter. God bless you. See you.